Did you know that construction on the world's most expensive building started in the year 638 and may have cost over $100 billion to make? From a religious site that can now hold 1.5 million people at a time, to a hotel with a 500-foot infinity pool, to a building where every single pane of glass is curved, these buildings required some serious dough. Okay, so the Great Mosque of Mecca tops the list of the most expensive buildings, and honestly, it's not even close. The overall cost of building this structure, over the course of many years, is estimated at about $100 billion. The catch is this number is a little fluid, since it takes into account the many expansion projects and improvements that have gone into it. It was founded in the year 638 and has stood as the most sacred site in the Islamic religion. It's where Muslims all over the world are expected to visit at least once in their life for their pilgrimage known as Hajj. Some people do it every year, others once in their lifetime. And when they arrive, they're greeted by the massive and utterly impressive sight of the Great Mosque of Mecca. In recent years, the mosque underwent its latest expansion, known as the King Abdullah Expansion Project. Due to the expansion, the mosque is now the largest in the world as well as the most holy. The primary area for worship is a giant open circle that surrounds the Kaaba. Muslims walk around it as part of their prayer during their visit to the mosque. But the building also encompasses many other sites like the Zamzam well, believed to be a miraculous water source, and the Black Stone, which is a rock believed to date back to the time of Adam and Eve. The overall structure covers about 88 acres of both indoor and outdoor space, and while the bigger mosque around the Kaaba dates back to 638, it's believed by religious scholars that the Kaaba itself was built in 2130 BC by the biblical figure Abraham as the foundation of his house. Over the years, there have been several expansions, including one in 1955, another in 1973, and another in 1984. Each time, the structure was enlarged to allow for more worshippers to visit at the same time. The most recent expansion allows 1.5 million people to gather simultaneously. From the mosque, a hop, skip, and a flight over the Mediterranean Sea will take you to the Yugoslavia Air Base. Back before Yugoslavia was referred to as the former Yugoslavia, it built this monster of an airbase that contained vast expanses of land, as well as a series of underground tunnels. Construction began in 1948 and was completed in 1968 at a cost of about $6 billion, but adjusted for today's money, that's about $46 billion. It was strictly a military structure, and it served a few purposes. For one, it was meant to be a hub for military radar and housing, since it was ideally placed on the borders of what are today Croatia, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. It was used for secure communications, housing for 2 fighter squadrons, and more. It was also built to withstand a nuclear bomb. Yugoslavia was a failed country for many reasons, but the fall of the USSR in the early 90s provided the catalyst that made these issues come to a head. Most notably, the country had basically been created by jamming a bunch of ethnicities in surrounding countries together and hoping everything went okay. And while there's certainly no rule against different ethnicities coming together to form one country, it can be tough when it's artificially done after a war. In this case, that was WW2. So eventually, the clashing between these formerly independent states erupted, turning into what are referred to as the Yugoslav Wars. The base was used extensively during these wars, primarily by the Yugoslav People's Army. Once they were defeated and forced to withdraw, they proactively set off explosions to render the base inoperable. And just in case that didn't work, Serbia's military later blew up more of it to make sure Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina couldn't use it. Today, it's controlled by the government of Croatia and primarily used as both a training ground for dogs to discover landmines, because there are so many of them still buried in the grounds there, as well as a place to house asylum seekers. Okay, so one figurative landmine I ran into when putting together this video is that literally the next 8 buildings on the list are all nuclear power plants. To that end, we're just going to lump them into one and just sort of acknowledge that apparently nuclear plants cost a ton to make. A couple quick shout-outs to the 2 most expensive though. Hinkley Point C Nuclear Power Station in Somerset, England, and Plant Vogtle near Waynesboro, Georgia. Hinkley Point C is still under construction, with plans for completion in 2027. It'll cost about $31 billion. Port Vogtle is almost finished construction, and it'll cost $30 billion. Okay, now on to more fun buildings. Speaking of fun buildings, you'd be building a really fun community for yourself if you subscribe to our channel. Pretty much the only thing you can do in the new SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California is have fun. That's because this $5.5 billion site, completed in 2020, is home to the NFL teams, the LA Rams, and the LA Chargers. It also hosts college football's LA Bowl, a recent WrestleMania, as well as potentially several upcoming games in the 2026 World Cup. It'll also be the location for the opening and closing ceremonies for the 2028 Olympics. It's a gorgeous stadium with state-of-the-art facilities. It won Stadium DB's Jury Award for Stadium of the Year, as well as the 2021 American Society of Civil Engineers Outstanding Architectural Engineering Project. Now, while SoFi looks great, it's still a stadium, so it looks roughly like most stadiums around the world. In contrast, the Marina Bay Sands looks like nothing else on Earth. This amazing resort and casino cost $5.5 billion when it was built in 2010, which comes out to about $6.8 billion in today's money. If you've seen pictures of Singapore in the past decade, chances are good you've seen this incredible structure. Perhaps you saw it in the movie Crazy Rich Asians, which had its final scene at the hotel. It boasts a hotel with more than 2,500 rooms, a huge convention and exhibition center, a theater, tons of restaurants staffed by celebrity chefs, and an 800,000 square foot mall. Oh, and it has the biggest atrium casino on the planet, plus a giant skyway that connects its 3 towers and a 500-foot infinity pool. So yeah, I can kind of see why that cost almost $6 billion to make. If you're watching this on an iPhone, MacBook, or any other Apple device, you helped cover a tiny fraction of the cost it took to build the latest building in the Apple compound in Cupertino, California. Known as the Spaceship, this circular building enclosed by glass took $5 billion to make. In the early 2000s, Apple quietly began buying up property next to its current HQ so it could expand into a second campus. Steve Jobs, along with former Apple design chief Johnny Ive and architect-designer Norman Foster, came up with the idea to make it a giant circle. Even Jobs had nothing but hope for the building, saying that when it was finished, it would be a place for architecture students to learn from. That's because each pane of glass they used had to be curved in order to make the building a perfect circle. The campus has a large green space in the interior of the circle and now stands as one of the coolest buildings in the world. Sadly, Jobs didn't live long enough to see construction begin, but at the very least, he played a huge role in its conception. And while Jobs is a huge name in tech, Steve Wynn is a big name in the casino industry. His casino and hotel, Wynn Palace in Macau, is next on the list of most expensive buildings, and it cost $4.2 billion to make. Finished in 2016, Wynn Palace stands as a 28-story building with more than 1,700 rooms. It also has tons of meeting facilities, retail spaces, and 13 restaurants. On site are the biggest spa in Macau, as well as more than 400,000 square feet of casino space. You won't lack for entertainment options there either, as it has theaters with live acts, a huge collection of incredible art, and an 8-acre performance lake with water that's choreographed for a variety of shows. At only a slightly smaller price point is the Cosmopolitan, a hotel and casino in Las Vegas that was built in 2010 for about $4.1 billion. This hip, trendy spot on the Vegas Strip features 2 separate towers that are both 600 feet tall. You can stay in one of the 3,000-plus rooms and enjoy the 300,000 square feet of retail space too. Plus, there are high-end restaurant choices, a large theater, and 110,000 square feet of casino space. Both of these $4 billion buildings represent the ultimate in a leisure and fun-filled vacation. On a more somber but ultimately positive note, the final entry in the video is One World Trade Center. It's often referred to as the Freedom Tower, and it was created as a replacement for the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. The building cost $3.8 billion to create and was finished in 2012. It's the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere and ranks as the 7th overall tallest on the planet. Obviously, the build has a huge significance for citizens globally, but especially in the US, as it replaced the towers attacked on September 11, 2001. The height, at 1,776 feet, is a nod to the year that the US signed the Declaration of Independence. It was intentionally designed to have the same footprint as the original towers, an area of about 40,000 square feet. It also has safety measures like a windowless concrete base. That's to make it less vulnerable to attacks on the ground level. And as a reminder of what it represents, a beam of light emanates from the top spire and shines 1,000 feet into the air every night. Okay, I'm gonna go build a Lego version of a few of these buildings just to feel rich and powerful for a few hours. Have any thoughts about these super expensive buildings? Pop them in the comments.